Tonight's event is donated and sponsored by Mr. and Mrs. Meyer Maselton in memory of his father, Harav Mordechai Ben Yosef, and by Mr. and Mrs. Joey Cohen. A Memorial Day, by definition, is dangerous to instate. It runs the danger of being stuck or becoming stuck in the past. We remember and we think about the past and aren't able to contextualize it today. It's for that reason every year on Yom Hashoa, in my mind, I review for myself, and this year, together with you, the proper conception of time. Time, as we often see it, is causal. We look at the past and we think how it caused what occurs today. But time is so much more than that. I often think about it by imagining the characters in Malcolm Gladwell's David and Goliath. He describes in that book many people in all facets and all walks of life who overcame insurmountable, seemingly obstacles that they could never overcome, and they did it. And his theory in the book is they didn't overcome them in spite of the challenges. They overcame and rose to where they were, the CEOs and the champions of leagues, because of where they started. The past influences and lives with us in the present. If you get stuck in the past, you misunderstand time. If you take the past and let it imbue the present with meaning, that's truly understanding time. That's using time to reflect, but to influence on the present. Every year, all of us are involved in one way or another in Holocaust memorial thinking, participation, and sometimes it affects us, other times not as much. This year we have the unique opportunity to hear from Rabbi Nissim Elnecave. This year, as we're discussing the Sephardic Holocaust, it's an opportunity to really let it touch us, because we can say this is something that's not only our neighbor's history, but it's our history. It's Rabbi Elnecave, who's a rabbi in the community for many years, who's a history in all facets of Jewish history, who's an expert in all facets of Jewish history, who came to teach us about something that many of us are unaware of and didn't know even existed at all. It's Rabbi Elnecave who can help us take the past and bring it into our present and change our reality.
I'd like to start by thanking Rabbi Avi Harari for the kind words and for having me here. Moises Maya, we go back a long, long time, and Salmon Cohen for this very, very special invitation. I was also thrilled to see a teacher of mine, Rabbi Ben Hamon, here, and I love you, Rabbi, and it's so touching that you're here amongst us. Thank you. I want to talk tonight about something, as Rabbi Harari just mentioned, that we often think that does not belong to so much to us. We hardly know any Sephardic families that went through the Holocaust or had anything to do with it. Our countries are Syria, Egypt. We often think about those places and nothing really happened there as far as we know. Yet unfortunately, for the Sephardim, this is not really true. Major Sephardic communities were devastated by the Holocaust. It's also interesting, but it is within our nature, part of the culture of the Sephardim, that we are not people that we like to promote ourselves necessarily, our rabbis. It's not the nature of our rabbis to publicize themselves too much. In Europe, that's somewhat different. And we can clearly see those trends in the world where the Ashkenazi world is able to publicize a lot more about themselves. And with the Sephardim, today we're beginning to do it. But it's many, many years, and you wonder why we don't publicize. It's just part of the nature, it's part of our culture. What I'm going to address tonight is basically the history of two communities. One is a Sephardic community, and the other one, which is not totally Sephardic. We're going to talk about the background of these people too. But I'd like to say before I start that there is a really great difficulty on talking about these stories. We run into very, very sensitive things. And for a long time, I had not wanted to talk about this specifically. The leadership that was responsible at the time in these communities. You see, because there's great tragedies behind what happened. And to speak about individuals when we weren't there, sometimes it's not fair. So I don't want to say, and to you, Kahal, respectfully I say that I don't want to judge what happened. Terrible things did happen. But we were just not there. We don't know how we would have reacted to the things, to the pressures that the people came under. But I do think, and we do think, that the story is very important for us to learn, especially today as a Sephardic community, because of how certain things are so terribly similar to the things that we see today. In a sense, a little bit of awareness, in a sense, a little bit of paying attention, looking at certain signs, looking at certain things. I think that's the most important part of our lesson tonight, of our lecture tonight. Again, the blame is not for us to make. We will talk about the names of the individuals who were involved. It's a little bit difficult, especially we're talking about the leadership and we're talking about rabbis. So, if we go to, this is the places that we're talking about. Basically, you see Salonika, it's right up there, the city of Salonika, which we're going to concentrate on. A city of, at a point, maybe 90,000 Jews, right up there, Salonika. And a small city of about 1,000 Jews, where you see the big word Greece, right under it, it says the word Volos. It's a small city. And the stories of these two places, if we can go to the next two pictures, we'll see the individuals that were heavily involved. This picture is the rabbi of the Sephardic community. Interestingly enough, his name is Tzvi Koretz. Is that a Sephardic name? Interesting. The chief rabbi of the biggest Sephardic community in the 1930s is an Ashkenazi rabbi. The next rabbi that we're going to talk about, who is in the next picture, is one of my biggest heroes. This man, his name is Moshe Pesach. Moshe Pesach is the chief rabbi of the Sephardic community of Volos. Rabbi Pesach, you can see we were laughing a little bit. I don't know if we can see the entire dress code that he has. Beautiful, beautiful dress code. He has a paroche that is wearing. This is the way the chief rabbi walked around in Volos. Interestingly enough, his community is a mix of Romaniot Jews. These Romaniot Jews are actually in the Jewish communities that claim that they came from Israel right after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, and they never left the area, and they call themselves Romaniots. They were there before the Sephardim arrived in Greece and the Balkans in 1492. He is a Romaniot of Romaniot descent. His community is mixed with Sephardim and Ashkenazim. As we begin to analyze what is happening here, we wonder how an Ashkenazi rabbi ended up being the chief rabbi of the Sephardic community. So we go to the next pic, and in that pic, we have a little bit of a history. We're going to go quickly through some of the pics because we have a lot of them. I tell you, the internet is fantastic, and I was researching, and we got a lot of information for you tonight. And you see what the history. We want to first see a little bit the history of Salonika. We're going to try to do it very quick. We're going to focus first on Salonika and then on Volos. Salonika is the tragedy, and Volos is sort of the salvation. So here we go. We have, the claim is that there was a synagogue by the name of Etzahaim that was built actually in the 1st century. The claim is that one of the apostles actually spoke to the Jewish community here, and that's where the synagogue was built. In 1376, Ashkenazi migrations made the community a little bit bigger. We have them in 1391. Most of us don't know, but there was a lot of Hebrew in Spain, and some of the Jewish people then already had fled Spain. 1391, that's the synagogue of Mallorca. Then you have 1394, Provincia, which is, these are Italian synagogues, Italia Yashan, 1423, and finally, 1492, we'll have an immense amount of Jews coming out into the Balkans. As we know that when the Spanish kings decided to kick the Jews out of Spain, what happened was that the Sultan in Turkey said, I want the Jews. They're going to bring wealth to my country. At the time, the Ottoman Empire is spreading, and it welcomes these many Jews. We know today that in Salonika, they might have been close to 10,000 Jews at the time of, after 1492. There's a number of migrations from Spain. They're constantly trickling out from Spain. We can go into the next pic, and we see here where the migrations were coming from, right? They're coming right out of Spain, and they come, this big group of Jews will come to the area that we know as the Balkans and into Jerusalem. Did you know that if you went to Jerusalem 100 years ago, you had to know Spanish, or you had to take a Hadami with you, whichever worked best. Because the Jewish community overwhelmed, the Sephardim overwhelmed all of these places. Jerusalem, Safed, and except Halab. Halab, they couldn't overtake them. So, but the other areas over here, we're talking about Turkey, Istanbul, Izmir, Greece, right? All the way up to Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, they were Sephardic Jews all over in those areas that practically overwhelmed the original communities that were there. In fact, if we go to the next pic, we see that there is an old drawing from these men in the pier. They are looking, but in reality, these are Jews. They are, Salonika is a port, and this is where these Jews begin to work. There is something very interesting history that we're told about. When these many Sephardim came to Salonika, there was already Romanian Jews in there. And the Sephardim came in such overwhelming numbers that the Romanian Jews began to complain. And they said, we were here first, and the minhag that we keep should be the minhag that you should be embracing. Rabbi Moshe Almosnino records fistfights at the port. We think that it was Rabbi Yosef Kar, a little boy, that saw these fistfights, and eventually put together the Shulchan Aruch, thinking of how to unite the people. As we go into the next pic, we see this is the empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Sephardic communities are all over in those places, the green places. The communities that became the strongest communities are two, because they are the ones that grew the most. It's the one that's Istanbul at the time, Constantinople, and Salonique, which is these communities had the most amazing type of development, especially Salonika. Salonika was this community that all the doctors of the time would have seminars. This is recorded already in the 1500s. Could you imagine the type of thinking that was prevalent in the city? The type of hachamim, the type of rabbis that were coming out at the time. Salonika becomes the center of Judaism, especially of Sephardic Judaism. As we go to the next pic, we see in 1863, this is not exactly 1863, I just want to give you a background of what the city looks like. Salonika, the Ottoman Empire. The Sultan in 1863 realizes that the Jews in Salonika are just so many. He tells them, if you pay a tax, which is not a small tax, I will give you the city to run it. You can run the city, you can bring all the types of equipment that you need for your businesses, tax free of taxes. And so, in that sense, could you imagine you walking into a city that's run practically by the rabbis of Salonika? They are the government in Salonika. They have the Batevim, very, very well organized. And so this becomes what other people called in the later years the Jerusalem of the Balkans. Very, very special city. The numbers in Salonika at the time are probably already 70,000 Jews, around those numbers. You have to understand that when we talk about population, 100 years ago, a city often is only 10,000 people, 5,000 people. Communities, you talk about a Jewish community, a big Jewish community will be 5,000 people, 3,000 people. That's a very big Jewish community. To talk about a community that has 60, 70,000 people, you're talking about a huge, huge community. You know, we don't, today we live in our cities, we have millions of people, so we look a little bit different at that than the way it was seen in those days. We can go to the next drawing, to the next pic, and we see a very special pic. I tell you, sometimes I just stare at this, and the amount of things you can learn from something, even though we have to move quickly because we got to get to the Holocaust part, but this is the Sultan. The gentlemen, the four gentlemen on the right are soldiers. They're coming to get a blessing from the rabbis that you see in the front. Do those look like rabbis today? These are typical Sephardic rabbis in the mid-1800s, late 1800s. Right? So I just thought that it was important for us to see a little bit, to get a little bit of an idea of what we look like in those days. Right? We go to the next pic, and here's what we see.
Right.
Yeah, he was not a dog from Salonika, but these are Jews in Salonika in the late 1800s. We can go to the next pic because we're going to go through about 7-8 pics now that I want to tell you, as you look at those pictures, the following comes statements I was able to read a little while ago. An American diplomat observed as much on arrival to Salonika. He said the following: when you come to Salonika, your boatman is a Jewish man masquerading in Turkish fez and trousers. On landing, you're hustled by porters, but they are Jews. You enter the custom house. The officers are Jews. Jews are the builders of the houses. Jews are the barbers. The children of Israel are everywhere in Salonika. He said, Salonika is a paradise for the Jews. Can you imagine? Everybody is Jewish in the city. And so it's just an incredible thing, the type of city that you have. So much so that Salonika, because everybody, all the Jews are pretty much observant, Shabbat, all the people in the port go home in the middle of the day. All of the boats that have made plans to come to Salonika, they must know, all of the non-Jews, They know that if you travel into Salonika, you will not be able to do anything if you arrive late on Friday or on Saturday. In fact, because of that reason, Salonika became known as the city named Sabbatopoulos, the city of Shabbat. This is what you call the Kiddush Hashem. Yosef ben Sevi writes about his travels. He says the following: whomever did not see Salonika on Shabbat or a Jewish holiday has not seen the strength of Israel in the diaspora. This is so beautiful. The strength of Israel in the diaspora. From the eve of Shabbat before sunset, everything stops at the port. Boats from Europe must calculate their travelings in order that they don't reach the port on Shabbat or Jewish holidays. Since everyone there is Jewish, they all part and go home to prepare for Shabbat. One can see thousands of Jews streaming out with their children on their way to synagogues and midrashim. Through the windows of the houses, one can see candles and tables set, clean, spotless. Could you imagine how beautiful? We go to the next pics. We're going to have another 2 or 3 pics when you see the Salonika Jews, how they dress the women. Of course, this is beautiful dressing in those days, right? I don't think many of the women would wear this type of clothing today. Right, we can go to the next pic. We'll move quickly on those pics because we've got to count now. Right, this is, right, one more pic. We go, this is, we're going to come to one of the interesting things that begins to happen in the Sephardic communities. One more pic. This is women, kids in Salonika, men hanging out. These are all workers, right? And now we come to soldiers from different backgrounds. They come to Salonika. We're going to go to the next pic and we'll talk about this one a bit later, right? One more pic, because that I just wanted to give us a little bit of a picture of what the Jews look like in Salonika in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This picture is from 1904. The Jewish community in Salonika is realizing that there is great changes in Europe, and the concern becomes, how do we keep our traditions alive? This is the inauguration of the Talmud Torah. At the center, you see, I don't know if I can point him out, but the chief rabbi stands at the center, Rabbi Kovo, right there with the Sefer Torah. There's the inauguration of the Talmud Torah in 1904. We can go to the next page. It is very important for Salonika, their tradition, their Judaism, at this point in the early 1900s. This is a huge cemetery that was in Salonika that will become, by the time that the Holocaust happens, this becomes a major point of contention. We can go to the next pic. This is the port of Salonika. You can see that during the First World War, actually it was 1912 when the Jews in Salonika, the Greeks actually, sorry, there was the war that happened between the Ottomans and the Greeks. Unfortunately, or as history has it, the Ottoman Empire is crumbling. There's all types of new movements in Turkey and the Ottoman Empire at the time. There's a famous individual that was born in Salonika, who we know him as Kemal Atatürk. He is the man that's going to lead the revolution for Turkey, for modern Turkey as we know it today, or at least until about 10 years ago, right? Atatürk. He was born in Salonika, interestingly enough. And the war that followed in 1917, Salonika becomes a major city where the Allies are landing. You see the plane over there in the bottom? They're landing, they're coming to Salonika because it's a major place that they're going to need for during the war. As we move on to the next peak, right? We calculate that at this time, Salonika is maybe 70,000 Jews, 50,000 non-Jews. So that means that you still have a great majority of Jews in the city. There's reasons why the Jews are beginning to leave. The wars, a lot of poverty, a lot of these Jews are ending up all over United States, Latin America. Latin America was a great place for these Jews to go because the majority of all of these Jews, they speak Spanish. So as we said, in 1912, Greece became independent of the Turks, right? And something new begins to happen in Salonika. The Greeks want Greece to develop a true identity as Greeks. Understand that prior to this, they're Ottomans. Now they feel they have independence, and now they want to claim their Greek identity. The Jewish community doesn't know what to do. I think that possibly, because of what begins to happen right here, this great change in 1912 begins to create a very deep question within the Jewish community in Salonika. It's a question of identity. We can go to the next page. Disaster hits. 1970. La dos de la tarde, la horica dan todos, says the song in Ladino. It's 12 o'clock, about 2 o'clock on Shabbat. And there was apparently a Greek woman that was cooking. The fire breaks out in her kitchen. She's not able to control it. Los mancebicos, the young men, were afraid to turn the fire off on Shabbat. 2/3 of the city are wiped out by the fire. We don't know of any people that died, but this is a terrible, terrible setback for the Jews in Salonika. 70,000 people are homeless. 50,000 of them are Jews. 32 synagogues were destroyed. 600 Sifrei Torah were burnt. The office of the chief rabbi completely destroyed. Hundreds and thousands of books and the major libraries that were kept by the Salonika Jews for centuries all disappeared in this fire. 8 schools were also burned. You understand how terrible this was in the community? Because as you're going through all the changes in history, right, and in culture, all of a sudden you have this incredible fire, and then all of a sudden you have so many people destitute. If we go to the next picture, you'll see a little bit more of the pictures of the fire. Aerial pictures, because the British soldiers were camped right near Salonika at the time. This is during the First World War. We can go to the next pic. This is some of the remains of some of the houses, some of the buildings.
Okay.
And we can go to the next pic. And this, let's see a map of Salonika and the section that was lost. The fire burned about 2/3 of the city. Now, very important that also this pic, I thought that it was important for us to see because we're going to talk about the cemetery, which is right here in this area. And you can see it's a huge cemetery. The cemetery goes back at least 500 years old. So, huge, old, and it becomes, shortly it's going to become a place of contention in a short time. So we can go to the next pic. We have in the next pic the visit of Hacham Haim Becherano. He is the chief rabbi of Turkey, of Istanbul, and he comes now. Understand that now Turkey and Greece are 2 different countries. He comes, he visits, and Salonika is in reconstruction mode. We can go to the next pic. We see all these men are firemen. They're all Jewish. This is typical Salonika. And the next pic that we see, right, we see a Jewish man asking from a water carrier a little bit of water, and they're both Jews, right? So just to get a picture of what life is like in Salonika at the time, understand a little bit of the background. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we want to see a little bit of the rabbinical background. We saw in a very tiny picture Rabbi Kobo, but this is the chief rabbi of Salonika, Rabbi Yaakov Meir. He was a Talmudic scholar, and Rabbi Meir went to be elected chief rabbi of Salonika in 1908, and he remained there until 1919. Interestingly enough, in 1911, he was appointed as chief rabbi of Jerusalem, but he was never able to go because the Salonika Jews, they wouldn't let them. Some of the Jews, it's recorded that they lay down on the train tracks, not allowing him to go. So much was the love for Rabbi Yaakov Meir. The next chief rabbi of Salonika came in the year 1921, and this is a very special man also. He is Rabbi Ben Zion Meir Hayuziel. We know him also because he was born in Yerushalayim. He became the first chief rabbi of the state of Israel. But he was for 2 years in Salonika under the condition that he was going to leave, he was going to go back to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv actually, at the end of that time. The community is now getting back on its feet, extremely organized. We can go into the next pics, and we can see that by this time, in the 1930s already, the synagogue has the community has 40 synagogues working, 20 philanthropic institutions, a medical dispensary, a hospital, a soup kitchen, orphanatories, hundreds and hundreds of organizations. I tell you, when I think of these things, I think of our community here. God bless how extremely organized we're here. We are here today. The amount of synagogues that we have, the schools, the things that we are able to work for and keep, and this is what we see back in Salonika in those days. We can go to the next pic. This is a very, by the way, if that picture it's a very important picture. We'll analyze it a little bit later. But these are the synagogues. The chief rabbi of the time, just a temporary sort of chief rabbi, is the individual that you see here on the top, Rabbi Habib, who very, very special individual. But there are changes in Salonika. Something is happening here that the Jews in Salonika seem somewhat uncomfortable about their own identity. We can go to the next pics, and we're going to see these are general magazines that they printed. This is all in Spanish, and the topic that they're dealing with is Shabbat is becoming an issue because in Greece, in those days, the Greeks are demanding from everybody to go to work on Saturdays, and the days of rest is going to be Sunday. To understand that Salonika is going through a major transition. We went from being a city of almost all Jews. In the 1863, we had the Sultan telling us that we can rule the city, and right now, there is a problem of serving Shabbat in Salonika. We can go to the next pic. The next pic, you see something that I know that a lot of you like, you enjoy the Bismonim. This is a group of individuals that write Bismonim, that young kids that are learning Bismonim. You can go to the next page and you find something very endearing to many of you. Bereshit, you sing Makam Rast. On Noah, you do Makam Naveh. On Lech Lecha, Makam Nechuft. On Vayera, Makam Hijaz, so on and so forth. Right? You have an entire list of the makams that are used every different Shabbat. You have the next page. You have the Talmud Torah, for the children, right? So the community very, very well organized. You have all the institutions working. We can go to the next pic. Torah Melacha, all types of organizations, right? We can go to the next pic. This is just to give us a little bit of an idea of how Salonika is gotten back on its feet, right? This is a little boy, the bar mitzvah, making bar mitzvah, they dress him up so beautifully like that. And here I want to make very interesting, something has happened in Salonika since the early 1900s. The Sephardim in Salonika are extremely Zionistic, many of them. What I had not realized is that about 10,000 Jews, 10,000 Jews from Salonika moved to Israel in the early 1930s. Part of the reason was because they were very Zionistic. Part of the reason is because they see Greece is becoming a little bit more and more anti-Semitic. So these are the first groups of Jews that decide to move to Israel. They're going to go to Tel Aviv, most of these Jews, about 10,000. And interestingly enough, if you think about it, these Jews are going to be spared what's about to happen. We can go to the next pic. These are the old rabbis, as Salonika was this tremendous city of producing all these tremendous Chachamim. But here comes the big question. We need to be more modern. The world is changing. We need something different. We need something that will have a better somebody that will have a better understanding of the world today. And so there is a committee that's put together. Rabbi Chaim Habib is kindly asked to step down as the chief rabbi as soon as we get a new chief rabbi. And as we go to the next pic, I was blown away when I found this picture. This is a picture of the meeting that took place when the new rabbi was hired. The new rabbi was born in Galicia. He studied in yeshiva, and after World War I went to Vienna to study at the university. After receiving a doctorate, he went to Vienna Rabbinic Seminary, the Hamburg Institute for Oriental Sciences. And then, when they meet him, the leadership is so very impressed with him. They bring him to Salonika, and they have this meeting. I was not aware that there was a picture of this meeting. But this is the president of the community, Mr. Leon Recanati, who's going to have, in a year from now, a tremendous fight with Rabbi Koretz, right here in the middle. You can see the Ashkenazi type of kippah. And I say Ashkenazi type of kippah because we don't wear those type of kippot. And understand that because there's changes that have happened that we have not noticed. But this is a very picture that tells a very, very important story of what happened here. The Salonika Jews are looking for a rabbi outside of their community. It doesn't matter that it's Ashkenazi or Romaniot. That's not the point. The point is that they're looking for something that they're not. There is a crisis of identity here. And I think that this is a major point of what brings about what's about to happen. They're so impressed with Rabbi Koretz. Rabbi Koretz, according to Rabbi Yosef Baur, he told me that he spoke to Mr. Florentin, who is all the way on your left, right? And he told them that Rabbi asked him, is there a theater in Salonika? They told him no. Salonika never thought of having it. It's a city that we didn't get there. Rabbi says, I'm leaving. And they jumped. That's the moment that we decided that we needed to hire the rabbi. It's interesting what's in the minds of the people, what they're looking for. They're looking for modernity in a whole different way. But now we wonder what is Rabbi Koretz looking for. Maybe we'll try to understand it in the next few pages, the next few words that we're going to analyze about it. Rabbi Koretz has tremendous leadership skills. He befriends individuals in the government of Greece almost right away. The dictator, Metaxas, falls in love with the rabbi, becomes very, very good friends. But something else happens at the time. 1934, Rabbi has asked for a special ladder for his orders, and he is the only one that's supposed to go up on that ladder. And the Jews in Salonika, the community, is a little bit like wondering. Rabbi is only praying in the new synagogue, where only the wealthy people go. You know, the practice in Salonika has always been that the protocol has always been that there is a synagogue where the chief rabbi prays. Why is the rabbi praying only by the wealthy people every day? Rabbi Mr. Leon Recanati approaches Rabbi Rabbi Koretz, and tells him, Rabbi, please, there's a lot of murmuring going around the synagogue, the community. We ask you, please pray in the synagogue where the protocol is that the chief rabbi prays. Koretz says yes, he doesn't do it. He goes back to him again. He tells him, there's a lot of murmuring, and it's not nice. It's the custom of the Thessalonica rabbis to be modest. You don't have to change your way of thinking, but it's just that for the sake of the community, we don't like the murmuring. Our rabbis are always very quiet people, very, very non-public people. Please, please, don't do it. Koretz says, I don't care. Recanati at the time is not only the president, but he has a newspaper, El Tiempo. He says to the rabbi, Rabbi, this is all public. It's not Lashon Hara. I'm going to publicize the disagreements that we have in the newspaper. Koretz says, I don't care. Recanati is also a tough man. He publicizes what's going on in the newspaper. As this happens, the next thing that the community finds out is that the chief rabbi of Salonika, Rabbi Tzvi Koretz, has sued El Tiempo, Recanati, in the Greek court. The community is stunned. They can't understand. Don't we have rabbis? Don't we have our own Bet Din? And hasn't our Bet Din been class Bet Din for centuries? Why would you go to the Greek court? Recanati doesn't mind. He goes to the court, he goes through the proceedings, and he wins. In 1935, at the end, almost at the time of Yamim Noraim, he writes in his paper that he's been justified just right before Yom Kippur, and he's thanking God. He's thanking God for that. He says, I knew I was right. The Jewish community of Salonika, the leadership decides that the rabbi is not for them. 1939. They decide at this point that they're going to remove the rabbi, but they don't want to remove him forcefully or embarrass him in any way. Recanati writes that what they did, they contacted a number of communities outside of Salonika and told and asked, are you interested on a rabbi? The community in Alexandria responded, and they said, we'll take him in. The place was right. It was a respectful move to do. They also decided to give quite a nice amount of money to the rabbi to leave the community. Surprise, surprise. Metaxas steps in. The dictator says the rabbi is not going anywhere. By law, by my law, I'm the dictator here, rabbi stays. Troubling, difficult. And what's difficult here is we wonder why the rabbi wants to stay. You're in a place where there's a lot of conflict at this point. Why won't you want to leave? You're going to a good place. Rabbi Koretz, in that sense, it's somewhat of a mystery. Life goes on. 1940. This is a very, very interesting document. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to point it out to you right here. This is from the rabbinate of Salonika. It's in Ladino, so most likely one of the secretaries wrote it. And he says, Gastes de Lulavim y de los Etrogim y Hadas a ciudades de Polonia. Right? He says, these are what we paid, the money that we paid for the Etrogim and the Lulavim that were sent to the cities of Poland. The city right here, Auschwitz. There's a tiny community there. And it's the irony of ironies. Most of the people here in 3 years are going to be there. We can go to the next speak. This is a little bit earlier, 1938. The Jews are well aware of what's going on in Germany. They know that the Germans have all these anti-Semitic type of moves. This is, by the way, this is Acción newspaper in Ladino, and these are the newspapers are all over in Salonika still at the time. We can go to the next page, but we can see that the information in Salonika is pretty much up to date. This is the type of newspapers that are printed in Salonika right up to the time of the war, right? And now, right after this, now we're going right into the time of the war. And I'm going to speed up a little bit. I know that I'm tired now. Some of you might be tired, but Germany begins the war in 1939, September, and slowly, actually very fast, they're conquering all types of lands. We know that in October 28, 1940, Italy is attacked by Greece. The Greeks are afraid of Italy's position, and they go and they attack Greece. In turn, in April 6, 1941, the Germans come to the aid of Mussolini, and they take over. That's why you see the land, the way they split the sections of land. This is controlled by the Germans. The blue is controlled by the Italians. The red is controlled by the Germans, and you can see right here, Salonika is right in the hands of the Germans. We can go to the next pic. Right, so the Nazis come in. The stores at first remain closed. The Germans order them open, and slowly, this is 1941, the people feel slowly they can begin to get back into their businesses, except all newspapers cannot be printed anymore. All the radios are to be turned in. There's only one newspaper that's printed from now onwards, and it's called the New Europa. Of course, heavy anti-Semitism is published in that paper. Right? The Germans take over all sorts of homes. The hospital, they take it over. Right? We're going to get to this picture in a second. I'll explain to you. 2 delegates are sent from the community to make contact with the Germans. Yet the Germans tell them, we'll call you when we need you. April 15, 1941. 8 leading officers, members of the council of the community, are arrested. All sorts of equipment is taken. Right. May 17, 1941, Rabbi Koretz was on a trip to Athens, and he makes a speech about the bombings that are completely inhuman, the type of bombings that the Germans are doing, and the claim that the Germans have is that because of what he said against the controlling armies, they arrest him. He's taken to Vienna to an intern camp, and for the next 9 months, nobody knows about him. In the meantime, May 22nd, 1941, Sifrei Torah are seized. As old as 400 years old, Sifrei Torah, those that weren't burnt in 1917, the Sifrei Torah have been taken. Libraries ransacked, the rabbinate. The Germans decide to select a weak man as the leader of the community, an individual by the name of Saltiel, in the meantime. But he's not a good guy, and he really doesn't know how to do the job well. 9 months later, Rabbi Koretz is brought back to Salonika. But not only is he brought back, he's asked to be the president of the community. At the time, the Prime Minister Sologlu of Greece, he says there's no Jewish question in Greece, as if they're going to protect all of the Jews that are in Greece. German scholars are sent to inspect all types of rare books that sat in the libraries, those that had survived the fires. So they sent all these experts to inspect those books. Thousands and thousands of archives from Salonika went missing. In the meantime, a lot of people in the community are going hungry. You understand, the port is not working the same way it used to work, so the economy is almost stagnant. The wealthy people are protecting whatever they have. The poor people have nothing. They're very hungry. The sicknesses are everywhere. Maladies increase. People are constantly dying in the rate to 10 or 15 people in the winters because of how cold it is. Together with that, the Germans bring about 200 people with German, 200 Jews with German, Polish, Hungarian, and Lithuanian background. Very strange type of people, deranged type of people, that they begin to take over houses in Salonika. The Jews don't know what to do because the Germans are pushing these people into their homes, sometimes asking the Jews to abandon their own homes. Exorbitant demands come from these people. We can go to the next page. This is since 1941 till the summer of 1942. Well, the next page after that, we're going to go to about because I mixed up the pigs. I'm sorry. I'll bring you back to this pigs in a few minutes. Two more actually. One more. There we go. This is July 1942 in Salonika. These are all Jewish men, ages 18 to 45. They've been asked on Shabbat morning at 9 o'clock to stand in the heat of the sun of Salonika. And they're just standing there. And there's sharpshooters on top of some of the buildings, so that you don't think of sitting. And if you go to the next pic, this was called, by the way, the Liberty Plaza in Salonika. You see the people, you can go into the next pic. Some of the men stood there for 8 to 14 hours. A number of them died, humiliated, made to exercise foolishly all types of abuses. At the end, they had taken all the names of these men, and all of these men were going to go to camps, to labor camps. And a lot of them were going to be worked to death. But part of the game that the Germans were playing was talking to the Greeks, whatever things they wanted from the Jews, and they found out that the cemetery had been a point of contention at some point earlier. The Greeks had come to the Jews in 1925 and had asked the Jews, can you spare part of the cemetery? The city is growing and the cemetery is really on the way. Well, the rabbis at the time, Chaim Habib and other rabbis, had decided, well, we can give parts of the cemetery, but they really didn't want to do it. It was too emotional. The city is very old. The cemetery is very old. Can you just really take down the cemetery? We can see their halachic writings on this issue. What can they do? Can they do it? Cannot. Whether they can or cannot do it. It turns out that when the Germans find out about the cemetery, they decide that they're going to propose to the Jewish community for 1 billion drachmas, I don't remember the number, but it was an exorbitant amount of money. They can redeem the people that are in the labor camps. Well, they say, well, sell the cemetery, give the cemetery to the Greeks for an exorbitant amount. The Greeks will get the cemetery and we will get the rest of the money. And those are the pictures that we saw before. And through that whole process, finally, a lot of the people that survived from the labor camps were able to come back. The cemetery was desecrated and the entire city was Jews at one point. Look, this is what they did. And in fact, the German soldiers, the generals, were wondering, where were the ghetto lines originally in the city? They could not comprehend that there were no ghetto lines ever in Sephardic communities. Yet, most of the Jews are in this section. A small group of Jews are in this one ghetto. What's going on? They asked Rabbi Koretz to make sure that every single Jew above the age of 5 wears a yellow star. Rabbi Koretz gets to work. He brings young people, and they're working day and night, to make sure that every single person in the community is carrying a yellow star. What's happening? Take a look over here. These are the train tracks, the railroad, right? So what the Germans are doing basically is, this is going to be right by the Baron de Hirsch, where that hospital was before. This is where the Jews are going to be brought, groups and groups, about 2,000 at a time, so that you can put it straight on the trains, and slowly you empty out the new ghettos, the second larger ghetto that you've made. March 1st, together with that, a Jewish militia was created, and this militia, interestingly enough, is the 200 men. Amongst them, there are the 200 men that had come from other cities that were constantly making life impossible for the Jews in Salonika. These individuals are part of that militia. And they're scaring the people, and they're terrorizing the people. March 1st, 1943, Jews must declare all possessions. Yaakov describes Rabbi Kodesh as working very hard to fulfill every request made by the Germans. Rabbi pleads with the community at this point not to do anything that might endanger the community by acts of disobedience. Many feel compelled to listen to the rabbi. We can go to the next pic. But each time that a new request is made by the Germans, Kodesh attempts to appease the community by stating that there will be no further request or other further concessions. He says there will never be a deportation of Salonika. Many people believe him. This is a picture where there's a number of Jewish partisans there. Michel Matzas, right? I was looking for. Right, Steve, no, but I was looking for you because of the Matzas name, right? They, part of these families who are in Salonika, they ran away. He describes in his book, The Illusion of Safety, he says, it was very easy to run away. The Germans only controlled the city, but outside of the city it was all forest. And the forest was controlled by the partisans. The partisans, every time that the Germans would try to go into the forests, the Germans would get blown away. A number of young people began to join the partisans. Rabbi Kodesh finds out. He turns to the family members and he tells them, tell your children to return. They're endangering the community. It's difficult to understand. At that same time, bank accounts, we can go to the next slide. Bank accounts are confiscated by the 5th and by the 13th, and by the 15th, all these bank accounts must be in. 104 hostages are taken as security, and suddenly 30 freight cars pulled into the train station. The word is out. The Jews are going to be deported to Krakow. March 14, 1943. The Nazis asked Rabbi Kodesh to address the community. Rabbi Kodesh is reassuring to the people. He says, this is unbelievable, but this is so difficult, this story. He says to them, he's addressing one of the big synagogues, the community, and he says to them, the great community of Krakow will welcome you and oversee that you establish yourselves properly. You will each be given work according to your ability and liking. By this date, Krakow, Jewish Krakow, doesn't exist anymore. The rabbi says, what else is there to do but to resign ourselves? Many of the Jews, many of the people, this is the rabbi, the Sephardim, they will have respect for authority. They begin to exchange their property. They're going to Krakow. They need warm clothing. They know it's going to be very tough for them to survive. They're not used to the cold in Poland. The Germans provide zloits. You know what zloits are? Those are Polish money, but they were all fake. So they exchanged the money from the Jews, and it's not even real money. It's so painful to hear these things. Here you see the pictures. People preparing to leave. We can go to the next pic. The first convoy leaves March 16, 1943. People are crammed, as you see all those pictures from all over the Jewish communities, crammed just the same. There's one barrel of water. There's one barrel for human waste. The trip is to last anywhere from 7 to 10 days. Of course, many of these people will not survive the trip. Sometimes you wonder, maybe it's better that they didn't survive the trip. A delegation of the Jewish community demands an explanation from Rabbi Koretz. He says, I will address the community again at 4 o'clock tomorrow at the main synagogue. It's March 17. Rabbi states, we must have courage and make sacrifices for the less fortunate, for the good of the name of the Jews of Salonika. And it's all a dream. Salonika is about to disappear. Jewish Salonika is about to get wiped out. The whole story of 400 years, thousands of years since that apostle spoke, it's about to disappear for the sake of the name of the Jews of Salonika. He spoke glowingly of the many marriages that had taken place amongst those about to be deported. They took young kids, 15 and 16-year-olds, and they married them, and they said it's going to be easier when you get to Salonika. The rabbi performed the weddings, and he said it's going to be easier when you get to Krakow, because you'll be taken as a family and not as individuals, not as single individuals. You wonder what he's thinking. They would have lynched them at this point. People are not. They can't take it anymore. They realize that they've been duped, many of them, and they were ready to lynch. If it wasn't because of the police, the Jewish police that surrounded him. It was the month of Adar, and the Jews expected some miracle that never did. Between March 15 and May 9th, 16 convoys carried away 42,830 Jews from Sephardic. The last group to be deported were about 800 people, some that had been left behind at the labor camps. And some of them had Spanish passports. So they go on the last train. The total people that are deported are 45,659, and they all go straight to Auschwitz. I was surprised. My family comes from Istanbul, Elnecave, and as I was talking to Solomon a few minutes ago, I found Nissim Elnecave in the archives of Auschwitz. There was somebody there with that name. I don't know if he's related, but it was shocking to see that. Yet 440 people went to a different camp, a labor camp, Bergen-Belsen, and we're going to see who went there. At this point, in the middle of May, at the end of May, or if you want to say at the end of August, Salonika is Judenrecht. For the first time, the Jewish city of Salonika, Sabatopoulos, is empty of Jews. Tragic. It's very, very tragic. Rabbi Koretz is arrested because he tries at this point to get in touch with Italian people in government, in the cities nearby, to try to stop the rest of the deportations. The Germans arrest him, and they put him under arrest. They remove him as president for the next month. And of course, as the war ended, about Salonika Jews, maybe some close to 2,000 survived the war. Not all of the 2,000 is the total of Jews of Salonika, so not all of them went to Auschwitz, but maybe about 2,000 of them survived. And so I'm a little bit behind, but I want to move very quickly because I want to show you just quickly the other side of the story. As we're gonna go quickly right now. These are still from the deportations. These are some of the rabbis that died in Auschwitz. Rabbi Hasid, Rabbi Elia Frances, Rabbi Asayas, Mordechai Asayas, And so all of these men, together with Rabbi Chaim Habib, Rabbi Yaakov, right? So all of them died, and you can. We can stop at Rabbi Barzilai, and Rabbi Barzilai is an interesting individual. I'm going to go very quick because I know I took a lot of time. That's who we know in the next 5 or 6 minutes. Rabbi Barzilai has a complete different view of things. He's not so easily duped by the Germans. He's the rabbi in Athens. And he says to the Jewish community, disconnect from the Nazis. Do not listen to anything they say. Because of his actions, about 2,000 Jews are saved. But now we're going to go to the next rabbi. He's the Sephardic rabbi, Rabbi Barzilai, and then we're going to go to the rabbi of Volos, the next pick. And the rabbi of Volos, next one, a very interesting individual. I tell you, this is a total Jewish hero. Rabbi Moshe Pesach, interesting name, right? Moshe Pesach. So he is the rabbi of Volos, chief rabbi, right? He has the beautiful parochet, as we said. And Rabbi Moshe Pesach, after the Jews of Salonika had already been, they were gone. Nobody knew where they were at that point. He realizes that he has a big problem. The Germans come into the city of Volos just a few months after, and they go to Rabbi Pesach, and they tell him, we want the lists of all of the Jews of Volos. You have a day. This is like one of those jokes, right? He goes, can you give me 3 days? Right? So Rabbi Pesach gets the 3 days. Enough time. He goes to a friend of his, who, we can go to the next page, right? He happens to be an Orthodox Greek man by the name of Joachim Alexopoulos. Joachim Alexopoulos is very, very friendly with the rabbi. They see each other all the time. And he says to him, wait, don't do anything. He has German friends. He goes to them, he tells them, what are you going to do with the Jews? Well, he says, we're going to send them away to Poland. They're going to be exterminated. He comes back to the rabbi and he says, I have here a letter that allows you to leave the city. I have my car, my limousine. Get into it, get out of here, tell all of your people to get out of Volos. Immediately, do not wait. Rabbi Pesach, if you can see in the next pic, Rabbi Pesach goes to the synagogue and he publicizes in Spanish what's about to happen. He tells the entire community, I don't want you here. Get out. Leave. Everybody out. Everybody into the forest. Out of the number is 863, about 1,700 of these people survived. It's one of the highest rates of cities to have survived the Holocaust. Rabbi Pesach himself became a fighter amongst the partisans. He lost 2 of his children in the fight. But as he came back, if we can go to the next page, right? He's part of the partisans. These are the partisans from Volos. We can go to the next pic, right? This is unfortunately Rabbi Koretz as we end. What's the lesson here? What do we get from this story? It's very difficult. Because again, if we were in a situation like this, what would we do? You have the Germans terrorizing you. How do we react when we're afraid? It's very difficult. But maybe choosing leadership is something very important that we have to think of. One thing that comes across very clearly is that Rabbi Koretz didn't identify with the community that he was with. The community itself was struggling for identity. To me, I think that's one of the major problems that have, one of the major issues that we have here. The next page on the other side, by Moshe Pesach. Right, this is the remains of Salonika today of the cemetery. We go to the next page. These are the Jews that came back after the war. There were all types of weddings, right? Massive weddings. Jews, Turkish Jews from America sent money to get these weddings. So about 2,000 Jews came back to Salonika. We can go to the next page. This is Hashoa. So he fully identifies with his community. He loves his people. And his people love him. I met a man that's still alive. He was a little boy. He remembers what I said. He lives in the Lower Manhattan. Told me wonderful things about the rabbi. It's wonderful. He was always looking after us. We were little kids. Rabbi Moshe Pesach got all types of rewards and all types of things. And I think the one most touching thing that I found as I was doing the research, I was not aware of this until about 2 days ago. He passed away in 1955, and he was buried right next to the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Nissim Elnecave. I thought that was so touching. Right? Two incredible leaders here. Again, we're here not to judge, but this is a history that we have to know. I think the leadership is very important to choose, to demand from leadership. Whomever it is, our rabbis, they have to be strong, right? We have to stand up. We have to stand up for the things that we believe in. We have to love our people. We have to identify ourselves with our people. I think those messages are very, very clear from this tremendous tragedy and the heroes of the tree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Any questions?
Any questions?
I have a question. I visited the Yanina synagogue in Lower Manhattan. It's the only Greek synagogue that I ever knew. Do you know anything about the history of that community and what happened during the Holocaust?
The Yanina community has a very tough story also. Most of them died, about 2,000 people, unfortunately. And the community there, the leadership was really, really duped. But, it wasn't the same as Rabbi Koretz, but it's a little bit, the outcome was very similar, where the leadership thought, and this is very tough to say, but the leadership thought that because they were Shomer Mitzvot, this is what they said, nothing would happen to them. Right? So the leaders kept on saying, listen to the Germans, nothing will happen to us, nothing will happen to us. And all of a sudden they were surprised by transports. So very, very tragic, very tragic. I mean, the communities, the synagogues that you see in the Lower Manhattan are communities that left before the war, right? So those are...
What was Rabbi Konitz and...
Yeah, it's very tough. Rabbi Koretz, I mean, I sort of skipped it, but I wanted to, and then I realized I was late. But interesting what happened with Rabbi Koretz. Rabbi Koretz was in one of the last convoys, and the convoy did not go to Auschwitz. The convoy went together with all of those people that were thought of being collaborators. They went to Bergen-Belsen, which was a labor camp. He survived the war, but he had typhus at the end of the war, and he died. The members of the Jewish community in Salonika that returned went looking for them, to judge them. There is an individual by the name of Al-Bala. They killed him. They took him to a court and they put him to death. And they said, we would have done the same with our recordings. Understand that there is a lot of emotions there. So, again, to say we're the judges and he's right. I don't know what to say. I don't want to say, right, that, but this is what they felt. This is how they thought that they would have dealt with him if he would have come back. Of course, the one thing that it's terrible, it's the wife did come back, and the children came back, and their names were tainted forever. Right? And I tell you, today, if you do any research in the internet, Koretz comes back as a collaborator in many, many places. And when the children, or the family, sure, the children, I understand they went to Israel at some point, the family moved to Israel. Salonika was not a place for them anymore. Could not be. I mean, aside from the fact that the Jewish community practically disappeared, and secondly, the fact is that those people that returned, they didn't see them, they weren't welcome to them anymore, right? So, but that fact it does come across very, very, very strongly, right? That the name was tainted. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time and.
First of all, I'd like to thank Rabbi Nissim Elnecave for the most informative presentation tonight. Thank you again also to the sponsors, Mr. and Mrs. Joey Cohen, and also to Meyer Masselton. And afterwards, please join us in saying Berachot in memory of Araf Mordechai and Yosef. Thank you for Moses Maya for partnering in this important project tonight. Thank you to Hadass and her crew for setting up the projector. And just a few upcoming events. A week from this Saturday, we have our annual Yom HaTzmaut program, which, as we've done in the past, we start in class early and have an extra long Seudah Shlishit, and we'll be celebrating Yom HaTzmaut. And last is our annual bake sale, which will be June 7th and 8th, Wednesday and Thursday, at the home of Raymond and Carlos Santuni. Please join us for the Seudah and back. Thank you.
The plane. Big
Hello.
I don't even have HDMI.
No, we need
You
a
want to
new
hit
one.
stop? Should I hit stop? Or
We
no?
need a new one.
I tell them I saw him. The Duke of amazing.